Welcome to a special episode of the Vanntage Point. In my talks on surname origins and meanings, I often recommend combining DNA test results and paper trails to accurately draw generational lines that connect your ancestors to you. Now, if you're into genealogy and want to make genuine discoveries about your genetic and cultural past, stick around. For today's show, we're going to be discussing some useful tips on how to get more out of your Ancestry DNA test results and your known family tree. I'll show you how I used my skinny, largely incomplete family tree, Ancestry's Thrulines function, and findagrave.com to learn more about where I came from genetically and culturally. In other words, on today's show, we're going to go in search of our recent genetic and hence ancestral communities. I hope you'll join me. I must admit that I spent most of my formative years doing genealogical research chasing tiny pieces of evidence that pointed to a coded and suspected Cherokee ancestry. My dad went to his grave believing that he was a blue-eyed, light-skinned Cherokee. Will Rogers was his distant cousin, and hence mine too, and since he was known as the Cherokee Kid, despite boasting blue eyes, Dad figured it was okay for him to identify with a native ethnicity. Now, one time when my dad and I were visiting one of Will Rogers' grandsons in Claremore, Oklahoma, Dad asked him how much Cherokee we had in our veins, to which Chuck said, "I'd hate to have to count it up." Now, what Dad and other folks failed to notice about the old comedian is that Will Rogers also claimed his Irish ancestry. He thought he was multiracial, multicultural. Through all my studies and travels, I came away believing that none of us are mistakes in God's eyes. So embrace who we are and where we came from, and realize that no matter what genes are passed on to us, we are all volitional creatures who add integrity and morality to our existence and impact the quality of life for our families and our communities. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, Ancestry DNA has been an eye-opener for a lot of people, including me. I recently traveled 150 miles from my house in Powell Valley of East Tennessee to Swain and neighboring Graham, Macon, and Cherokee counties in western North Carolina. Those counties are the core of southern Appalachian region, but why did I choose to decide to spend a day exploring the region's picturesque valleys, ridges, and communities? Well, the short answer is that thanks to Ancestry DNA, I was able to determine that the mountainous subregion of America's eastern mountain range is the heart of my genetic communities. The idea of a genetic community, as far as I can tell, originated with Ancestry DNA. However, to maximize the benefits of Ancestry DNA, you need to build a reliable and valid family tree, but it doesn't have to be extensive. Most people can't go back further than great-great-grandparents, and sadly, many folks don't know the names of even their first great-grandparents. Nevertheless, your DNA and even a modest family tree posted to Ancestry.com can help you and others find missing ancestors or people related to them. Now, Ancestry's use of DNA matches and their family trees to add insights into our more obscure vacant limbs on the old family tree. Now, this is a service that Ancestry's Thrulines performs for its members. Here's a snapshot of some of my fifth great-grandparents. This is just a handful of the 128 people who are my fifth great-grandparents. Now, I would say that nearly 90% of them were found through the help of Ancestry's Thruline service. By using that information and genetic communities, I was able to focus my attention on the geographic hearth of my American ancestors community. Please note that this is different from ethnicity estimates that tie us to places like England, France, Jamaica, where else. These genetic communities are similar, but they're often based on locations of recent ancestors as well as those of our DNA matches. Again, this is only possible if you do a DNA test and post a family tree to Ancestry.com. Now, my three genetic communities are Southern Appalachia, North Carolina settlers, including the Appalachians and the Piedmont, Tennessee settlers, especially the Upper Cumberland Plateau region. It's not too surprising that those genetic communities parallel the historic migration routes of pioneers. The region along the Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia borders seem to me to form the crossroads of my paternal and maternal grandparents, or family lines, I should say. Goes way back more than just grandparents. What I found especially fascinating is that my mom's maternal lines, which I knew very little about, were concentrated in southern Appalachia. Before Ancestry, I was only able to locate the graves of 2 sets of triple great-grandparents and 2 sets of double great-grandparents, and not one of them was on my mother's maternal line. They were easy to find though because they were buried in local cemeteries and had legible headstones. With the help of Ancestry and family tree DNA, I was able to identify Jane Swearingen, who was born in 1785 in, I think, Burke County, North Carolina, died in 1867, as my 5th great-grandmother. What's fascinating for me is that she carried my mom's mitochondrial DNA. That means my mom could trace her maternal line back through Jane. I was also able to use findagrave.com to locate her final resting place. It's in Swain County, North Carolina. You might note that family tree DNA tested my Y-DNA and my mitochondrial DNA, and through its mitochondrial DNA matches, I learned that Jane's mom was identified and her name was Nancy Swearingen. And through Ancestry.com, I learned that her maiden name was Massey. She was born in Anson County, North Carolina in 1754 and passed away in Bumpkin County, North Carolina in 1811. I'm now nearly 100% confident that I know where my mom's line lived all the way back to the mid-1700s. Since mother's lines have historically served as the producers of culture, I felt that I was standing on what seemed to be, as far as I was concerned, holy ground. It was where my sainted grandmother's mother's line lived, loved, and was laid to rest. When I arrived in Stokoe, North Carolina, where my great-grandparents lived, great-great-grandparents lived, great-great-great-great-grandparents lived, I was immediately struck by the prominence of the family crisp, my maternal grandmother's maiden name. It didn't take long to locate the graves of a double great-grandmother and those of 2 of my 4th great-grandparents. I have to say that visiting the places where my sainted grandmother's maternal and paternal lines lived for centuries helped me to more fully appreciate the struggles and triumphs that our ancestors had on the family's way to our time. Well, folks, that's all I have for you today. I hope you found the discussion useful and will join me again in a few days for episode 13 of the 2nd series on the surnames of Appalachia and the antebellum South. In the meantime, may the good Lord bless and keep you. May he make his face shine on you and give you peace. Bye-bye.